William A. Adams. It's rare that I get to kind of geek out in a technological sense with a guest. William is former Microsoft. He started a company with his brother when he was younger. He's just a little bit older than me in his mid to late 50s. Started with a Commodore 64 and a Commodore PET. I started with an Atari 64. It's the same age, and it was all about the hardware back then. But now William, he's no longer at Microsoft. He was there for almost 25 years. Now he's invented something called Tequity. It's equality in technology, technology and equity, where he talks about inclusion and hiring minorities and women. Just he has this something called the event where he goes into these areas and helps and kind of match makes, brings thought leaders in to help communities, to help areas. But just a fascinating man. He's got 2 patents. With his company, he worked with Steve Jobs with his Next computer, and he has great stories about that as well. Just a great conversation with William. Fascinating man. What he equivocates discipline to is fascinating. Wait till you hear that. And just a great conversation with William. I know you're going to enjoy it. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pins. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic. I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pins Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration.
But the link I had didn't have the S on the last of the Adams. So it's like, it should have just said, no, sorry, that's not a valid link. But it didn't. So
no problem. Well, I really appreciate it. William A. Adams, such a pleasure. I'm very, very excited to talk to you. Has the technology, let's say technology industry, has it always been fair to minorities and women?
No, it's never been fair to minorities.
Tell me what you really mean. Yeah.
No, but that's not only true of tech, that's true of a lot of things. But no, it's never been fair. But our numbers are small and growing.
And why is that? Why hasn't it been fair?
Do you mean like what are the examples of it not being fair, or why is it? I mean, the why is hard for me to answer because I'm not the dominant culture that's making it unfair. I'm just the participant, right? I won't say victim because I'm not a victim. I mean, I've made my way in tech for 45 years.
Yeah.
So I've never felt like a victim, and I don't go woe is me and all that. But fairness is what you make of it. And why is it like that? Because dominant cultures are like that, right? If you get a lot of anything in a room, even if it's a bunch of women in the room, they're going to discriminate against whoever's not the women, right? So tech was filled with a bunch of white males in the US, and that's what dominated. And everything else is not that. So everything else has to struggle to get in, right?
Yeah, you used the term. I heard you use the term tech bros.
Tech bros, yeah, yeah. You want some elaboration on that?
Please.
Yeah, tech bros, and like I said, you see this in any sort of industry. Tech bros are the um, you can look at just sets of people who tend to help each other out, right? And you can look at I'll pick on PayPal for a second. Um, PayPal generated a whole bunch of guys like Elon Musk and Reid Hoffman and a few other guys. There's like 5 or 6 of them. Um, and they're all billionaires, right? Rightfully so. They worked hard, they sold their thing, and they got their big money, and they support each other in their future ventures.
Mm.
OpenAI was started by Elon Musk and Reid Hoffman, and and you could say, "Oh, these guys are brilliant. They're the geniuses. They're the ones that should be doing this stuff." I was like, "Yeah, there's that." And when you have buddies, you follow them and you support them, and it's perhaps put blinders on for following and supporting other people. That's what tech bros are, right? It's like we've made it, we're doing our thing, and we're going to bring our friends with us. And our friends
Mm.
so happen to look like us,
Right.
right? And the people you've done stuff with in the past. Now, if I were more bold and audacious and more intelligent and made my millions years ago, I might have been a tech bro,
Mm.
and I have my posse with me, but I don't. So
And that's one of your missions now, William. And
yes,
you're calling it Tequity.
yes, exactly. And I'm trying to say, okay, there's no point. There's two things that don't work. One is having your hand out, asking the dominant culture to give you a leg up. Give
Mm.
me some of what you have so that I can have what you have. It's like no one's going to do that. We'll token do it. It's like all right, all right. We'll give you a couple of positions here and there, but you're never gonna get there. You're always going to be 2 steps behind. So I want to help people first recognize that it's like stop complaining. You have intelligence. Let's put it to work,
Mm.
right? Let's not go, woe is me, hand out, please give me what you owe me. Nobody owes you nothing. The world is a competitive landscape. You've got to make your own. Now, let me show you how you can, right? There are ways to make it in tech, being the women and minority. If I'm any example of it, we can do it. Um, and you need support. It's not like you go out into the wilderness on your own and say, "Oh, I'm not gonna be friends with anybody." It's like you are,
Mm.
but let's do that thing. Don't just sit back waiting for it to happen for you because it's not going to happen that way, right? So yeah, that's what it's all about. Integrity is just saying technology and equity in technology is what gets you elevated, right? Having a job, having a good salary, that's all great. But if you want intergenerational wealth, you need equity in the technology that you're building. You need stock,
Mm.
you need patents, you need to own the company, right? That's how wealth is built, not just because once you stop working, your paycheck stops. That's it, right? If you don't have any stock or patents or anything else, you can't transfer your paycheck to your children, right? You stop working, you're done. So that's what Tequity is all about. Yeah, I'm on a mission,
Yes, you are. Yes, you
right?
are. With your great event that you have, everything that you do now, your former Microsoft executive. I mean, you were there a long time, 20
24
years.
years, man. I
Yeah,
actually recently left, end of
yeah.
September. Yeah.
And you miss it?
You go through phases. I would say that me leaving took a year, actually, from the time I thought, should I leave, to the time I actually left was about a year.
Wow.
And there's a lot of that goes into it, a lot of emotion, a lot of, oh, I should have done this last
Mm.
thing, and a lot of, I'm walking away from all this money and there's good benefits. But at the same time, I recognize that I still have a mission, and it's my own mission. It's not Microsoft's mission, right? Microsoft is in the business of making money for Microsoft. They're not in the business of tequity, right?
Right.
It might be a side thing that so happens to occur while they're making money, but it's not the primary mission. So it took me a year, and then finally it's like, okay, now you're back in the wilderness. Do you still have the energy, the tech? How good are your tech chops really?
Mm.
Because you've been kind of sheltered over there, bro, for 24 years. Can you still write code? Can you talk? Can you still be an entrepreneur? Can you talk the talk, walk the walk, all that sort of stuff? And that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, you're certainly doing it and doing it very well. I'm in the tech industry myself, and I talk to a lot of executives of some of these really large firms, and you use the word sheltered, and you could sense in many cases that there is kind of that sense there that, gee, I wonder how they would operate in a small business on their own, not with all this layers and layers of
Not very
just
well.
comfort. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
imagine.
It's hard. I mean, I was a pretty big manager at some points, various points in my career at Microsoft, and going to being an individual contributor, meaning you don't have a lot of people working for
Mm,
you, it takes time because
mm,
you're used to pointing at people. You get this
right.
done. You get this done. And then when you're on your own, you're pointing at the mirror. So the finger points back. It's like, oh, I've got to take out the trash. Oh, oh, I forgot. Where are the trash cans again? you know. So yeah, it's an adjustment. It's different. Um, Lucky for me, I mean, I'm leaning heavily on the coding side because I've been doing that since I was 12 years old. So it's like, yeah, I still know how to code, and I can code as well as anybody on the planet. So I'm gonna lean into that and just do extraordinary things through code, while I'm also sharing the whole. Here's the benefit of my years of managing, shipping product, building business, blah blah blah. Right. So
Yeah, it's very true. I have certainly a small business, but I never get to see a project from beginning to end. You're constantly delegating things and there's part of a team effort. So I found that I've kind of turned to cooking in the last few years because I
hmm,
walk into the kitchen, it's clean. I take out all the ingredients, I cook, I make a mess, people eat, I clean, and then I put everything away. So I've actually seen a project from beginning to end. It gives me a
yeah,
very great sense of fulfillment where I don't see that in my job.
yeah,
Uh, it's just I don't know why I just came to that realization recently. You mentioned you were coding since you were 12. I believe
yeah.
you're 57
Now
years
I'm
old.
58.
You're 58 now. So I'm 54. I'm 4 years younger. I started coding. You went straight to assembler to basic, which is incredible. I went right to
Yeah.
basic. Why assembler? Because of the speed, obviously.
No, not because of speed. It's because that's all I had. So on the Commodore PET,
Uh,
um, I can't. Yeah, there was a basic that was inbuilt, and you could do certain things. But for some reason, as a 12-year-old, I why would I know any different, right? I was
mm,
given the books at that time. They used to give you like the manuals of like, here's the schematic for the computer, and
right.
here's all the assembly instructions and stuff like that. So I just coded in assembly because I could. It's like, well, basic assembly, whatever. So I just did, right? So I learned or taught myself 6502 assembly, and it's like, oh, okay, and this is how the machine works. And then I wrote some code in basic. It's like, oh, okay, this is a little easier, but not by much. And then much later came like I think Pascal was the first language I learned in college. Pascal, then C and C++, blah 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 blah. Right.
Yeah, Pascal, once we got to college, it's that kind of educational, all of a sudden it's procedures and
Yeah.
it's layering back and forth and it's not really object orientated, but you're learning. It's just a big shift. But yeah, when we taught ourselves basic, we were on Atari computers back there. We had
Yeah.
Commodores as well, but there were no hard drives, so you couldn't turn
There's
your
tape.
computer off.
There's tape.
That's right. There was tape, and you had to record the numbers that it was recorded on. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
such a different time.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking in this little box that has the Commodore PET, the 64 in it. It's like, oh yeah, there's a disk drive in here. But that was much later.
The
That was
floppy.
later.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember buying a 10 meg hard drive, one of the first ones, and it was $1,000. And yeah, I thought this was it. I'll never need anything ever again. I am king of the world. I
That's
could
not even
record
a
it.
thumb drive now. I mean,
Oh
that'll
yeah.
fit on your pinky.
Oh, there's more room in here on our phones than that. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then back then, basic, it was so amazing. Everything was focused on the hardware. It's like, okay, here's all this great hardware, and here's a manual to learn basic, and here's and the hardware never really impressed me. It was always the coding. It was always the languages that it really was magnetized to. How about you?
I went both ways. So early on, my entree to computers was even before computers existed at the, consumer level, typewriters. So
That's right.
mechanical things, electronic things. So when I was like, let's see, what that was, third grade. When I was in the third grade, that's when, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like, I want to own an electronics company,
Right.
because we were surrounded where I grew up by like Rockwell International, Hughes Aerospace, and all these engineering companies. So, like you said, software, what's that? Whatever, it makes the machines run. But it was all about hardware back then. I could go dumpster dive and
Mm.
pick up some actual hardware and play with it. And I used to take radios apart with, that's when we still had tubes and radios, and calculators. And so I was a hardware guy, you know. And then the computer came along, and then it's like, oh, the first thing I did with my Commodore PET was I put a joystick on it because I learned how to connect to they had this IO edge card thing. So I learned how to connect to it electronically so I could
Hmm.
hook up a joystick, right? Which I got off an Atari, I think, Atari console. So it's like, all right, yeah, yeah, hardware input, yeah, this is where it's at. And then, then the software.
Right. Yeah, I think you said you were raised in Anaheim, California, where
Yeah,
there's all that. I think you also said like your uncle had the pet, and your
yeah,
father was an IBM typewriter or something, and that's how
yeah.
you kind of got.
My dad was a typewriter repairman. Um, he passed away when I was 7, so he
Oh
didn't get
wow.
to see the whole ushering in of the computer stuff. But my uncle worked for the Navy, and he had this Commodore PET, and he said, "Oh, how'd you like to have this computer?" It's like, yeah, what 12-year-old wouldn't? Computer, what's that? So yeah, that's how I got started. He gave me
I remember.
the thing, gave me the magazines, gave me a couple of books, and said, "Good luck,
That's right. Go at it. Yeah,
go
magazines were
at
big
it."
too. I remember my high school. I'm from Northeast New Haven, Connecticut, and they had TRS 80s.
Yeah, yeah, much
The
later,
the
yeah,
Radio Shack, yeah, much later, yeah, which we eventually called Trash 80s, or
yeah.
some did. But, Basic on there was very good, but it was all tapes, when I don't know whoever's listening, when we say tapes, we mean like cassette tapes.
Cassette tapes.
Yes, that you heard it's just the music on. Those devices recorded our programming, and
Right.
most of the time it worked.
Yeah.
Sometimes
And
it
otherwise,
didn't.
you had to type it all in again.
That's right. Yeah, get a good printout. That was our backup. Print it out in case you don't get it and you'll have to type it back in. And then you made the switch over to software once these languages became more and more prevalent. I remember one of our first we call it an app now, we didn't call it back then, but we had bulletin board systems,
Yeah, yeah. Bulletin
BBSs.
boards. Yeah, BBS. The modern day equivalent of today would be like Instagram, and well,
Right.
not even that because there's more community involvement than that. But yeah, I did that way later. I didn't do that when I was younger because I didn't get a modem, which allowed you to
Ah,
connect to anything
yes, yes.
until college.
Oh, wow.
I think last year of high school, first year of college. So 1981, 82, 300 baud modem.
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah. Yeah, you
So
squeeze the
yeah,
phone into it. Yeah, yeah.
so connecting to the and we didn't have the internet, right? We just had these
Right.
BBSs that you would dial into, and there's maybe 5 people on at one time or less. You would post a message and then you get off and come back later and read it. So yeah, went through all that.
Yeah, and at a certain point, they were actually starting to host games. Now, I use the term games very loosely. They were,
Hunt the
all,
Wumpus.
yeah, all ASCII, not even
Yeah.
Pong, nothing that advanced, more ASCII, just kind of text and
Adventure
uh,
games.
adventure games. Yeah, we ended up making one ourselves, a buddy and mine, and it was a system back then where we got a PO box and said if you like it, send some money, and we ended up making a little bit of money, but that was our foray. Can you imagine doing this as a career in the future? That would be incredible, and now, of course, now it's completely changed, not only the technology but just developing itself, the tools that are out now. The you quickly went over to C. Of course, Microsoft created C Sharp, which is,
Yeah.
I still think we use a lot of Visual Basic. We stuck with that in the Microsoft
Yeah.
stack, but still, uh, as far as compilation, it's like 99.8%
It's all the
the
same
speed is,
stuff.
yeah, it's all the same. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think languages, I've counted over the years, and it's like, yeah, I've probably learned and lost maybe 10 languages or thereabouts over the years. And it's like, whatever. At this point, they're all versions of C anyway.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
except, I mean, there's a departure where we added in garbage collections. So you got JavaScript, Python, C Sharp, all those guys were use garbage collection. But syntax wise, and a for loop is still a for loop.
It sure
An if
is.
statement is still an if statement. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what the
Yeah.
syntax. It's all the function's a function. you know.
Exactly right. I guess the big shift is when programming, I still call it programming in the browser, where it's kind of a stateless environment, where, you know, uh, there's a front end and a back end, and, that
Yeah.
versus client server, where we kind of had that, clear connection all the time. Just kind of a mind shift set, but overall, it's still fun as all heck. I haven't coded in a while though. What do you code now, William?
The thing I've been doing most recently, like even this morning at 4 a.m.,
Wow,
is well, I'll tell you how coding has changed, and then I'll tell you what I'm doing.
please.
So we just said all the languages are the same. Yes. Until this last year, we
Mm,
heard about this thing called ChatGPT. And that is a game changer, just like the introduction of the personal computer was in the first place.
mm.
Because now you're talking about navigating a program rather than writing code, right? And for those of you who don't know what ChatGPT is, it's basically I can ask it questions like, "Hey, what's a good algorithm for doing a motion blur on this image?" And it'll actually write the code. Say, "Whoa,
Wow.
you could do it this way." And it's like, "Okay, copy paste, done. Thank you very much." Go collect your paycheck. But that really changes the game because now you're thinking, okay, the better quote programmer is going to be the person that knows how to navigate something like a chat GPT because that's going to amplify their skills. And I use this all the time. When I'm coding now, I use this other thing called Copilot, which is not quite chat GPT, but I can type a comment in my code. I'm writing my code in C++, let's say. I can write a comment like display a window, create a window, and it will automatically fill in the code. And it already knows I'm on the Windows platform, and it sees other code around and it says, "Oh, okay, you're
Wow.
talking about a window." And it'll automatically put in the 20 lines of boilerplate code that you have to write to get a window on the screen. And I kind of look at it and go, "Yeah." I press tab, done, right? It's like, okay, I just saved myself writing 20 lines of probably bug filled code.
Mm, mm.
And the computer just filled it in, right? That means that all my 45 years of coding can be accomplished by someone who's 2 years into coding because the machine knows all my code. It used it to
Wow.
train itself. So if someone says, I want to write an algorithm like William did, that XML parser. And it'll
Hmm.
go, oh, well, boom, here you go. Right? It's like, that's a game changer because now we can jump up another level, right? Coding becomes this conversation rather than I get paid a lot of money because I have knowledge that you don't. And I know the secret incantation in the secret language, C, C sharp, C++, and you don't. It's like, no. Customers in the next 5 years are going to be saying, they're going to talk to the computer, they're going to describe what they want. I want a Bloomberg terminal over here, and I want to take the COVID report and slap it on top of a population density map this way and show that to the governor. And it's just going to happen, right? There's no code. The computer's just going to make it happen. Now, people like me are going to make sure that happens. So what I'm coding right now is what I'll call the phonemes, so that you can have that kind of conversation and stitch code together through plain English, right? And it's a lot of things from being able to parse esoteric file formats, like I was just working on SVG, scalable vector graphics. So I wrote a parser that parses SVG and displays a graphic. So you can now say, show me that image of that thing. And that thing so happens to be SVG. And I go, oh yeah, here you go. Right?
Wow.
There's no more, and I have an environment that I'm creating called Wave Studio, which is essentially, forget Windows. It's like, why do you need to bring up Paint? Why do you need to bring up an application? Right? Just say what you want. Show me the map of the US in 1923. Put it over there. Boom, done. Okay. Who cares what the app is?
Right.
I just want to see the thing. Now share that with my brother Steven through email. Boom, done. Right? So what I'm coding is all the little bits and pieces required to make that kind of interaction happen.
Wow.
Right? It's like, I'm tired of Windows and mouse and keyboards. We've been doing the same thing for 45 years.
It's true.
Let's break that screen. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. I code every day, hours and hours and hours, trying to make that happen. And I do that so that I can attract other people, women and minorities, my tribe, say, look, y'all, something interesting is going on over here. This is really cool and cutting edge. This is how you want to get into tech. Don't go over there and fix bugs in 20-year-old software. That's not going to get you anywhere. Come here. We're on the bleeding edge. And this is how you're going to get forward. And this is what you're going to get patents on. And this is how you're going to build your wealth, right? So that's what I'm doing.
Speaking of patents, you do have two of them.
Yeah. One of them is, you're like, you drop these little crumbs down there and then I go on for like 10 minutes.
I love it. I love it, William.
Speaking of patents, you got a couple. Let me tell you, boy. Yeah, one of them was early on. I did with my company Atomation. It's for this collaborative technology. So I'll explain it like this. So today, the fact that you can bring up Google Docs or Word and multiple people can edit it at the same time. I have a patent on the core technology that makes that kind of stuff happen from 1991.
Wow.
And then those things, I believe I saw a Microsoft patent later in like 93 or 94 that refers back to my patent, So all of these things that do collaboration stem from a particular couple of techniques that were invented back then. And I had one of those techniques. So that was one patent. The other patent is more of a collaboration with a lot of people. There's this technology called XML. And we at Microsoft had a whole framework of stuff around XML, and I have my name is one of many on a patent for that.
Extendable markup language.
Yep.
Correct.
And it's just markup language.
Yeah, yep. It's just a way of having one universal file that many applications, many inputs can understand it.
Yeah, I mean, the easy way to understand it is to say, HTML. Well, XML is like that.
Sure. Yeah, it's got tags. It's very similar. Yeah. Very interesting. And then you, after your kind of foray as a child and learning these languages, you eventually worked for Steve Jobs at Next. Now, Next is his...
No. So we had a company, my brother and I, Atomation, and Steve Jobs had Next, and we developed software for the Next platform, but we had our own company. So we went on sales calls with Steve, which was fun. And we were very integral to part of their success or lack of success early on. So yeah, we were in the mix in that whole Next era before he went back to Apple.
So he made Next after he got fired from
Yeah.
Apple.
Yeah, he got pushed out of Apple, and he's,
Yeah.
"Well, I'll show you." And then he created Next, you know, and it wasn't a super commercial success. I mean, it just
Right.
hit things wrong, the wrong time,
Yeah.
recession, all that sort of stuff. Um, but then, uh, they weren't being successful at Apple, so they begged him to come back, right? So you could say Next bought Apple is really the right way to think about it.
Is what happened. Yeah, my at the time I was dating somebody at Brown University there in Rhode Island. They had a whole lab of these Next computers, and
Yeah,
I was going, These are great. I mean,
so
they're tight.
nice.
They were really nice machines, and it was really incredible. And he's such a figure, Steve Jobs, and
Yeah.
I mean, what was he like after being fired like that, making this new venture? Was he's just up all night and he was just in big entrepreneurial mode? I mean, was he tolerable? Was he good to work with?
Well, my interaction with him was more as a company, outside. I didn't have to see him on a daily
Ah,
basis. So, uh, there's certainly plenty of people that he would just rip them a new one,
right,
you know,
right. That's what we
insulting
hear.
them, their intelligence, their crappy product, all that sort of stuff. Um, with us, he didn't. The worst thing he ever did with us was say, "Well, this particular thing is a C plus product." I was like, you're probably right. Actually, it looks kind of dumb. It has a face only a mother could love. But he didn't rip into us because we were helping them make sales, you
Right,
know.
right,
And I'm not saying he didn't rip into us because we were helping him make sales, but
right.
we were doing stuff, and it's like there's no need to harass us. We're doing stuff.
Very interesting.
Um, I thought he
Well,
was. Go ahead.
no, you, please.
All right, I was just gonna say, the thing about Steve, rest his soul,
Of
uh,
course.
is that he was very, sure, he was very in your face, but he was often right. And
Mm,
one of the things that he did
mm,
that I don't see a lot of CEOs do today was he personally had an intuition about what the consumer should want.
interesting.
He didn't do it by, well, let's do a survey and go to the mall and ask 500 people what they want, and that's what we're going to build. That's what we do today, analytics.
Right.
Well, analytics are looking backward. How's that going to infer the future? So, what he had was a sense for, no, people want this device in their hand that combines MPEG player, a phone, and word processor or whatever, a recording device. Um, he had intuition, he had vision, and that's what he was driving for, right? And he would do things like, I mean, these things seem obvious now because they're now part of the canon. But at the time, he pioneered things like there shouldn't be more than 2 clicks to get something done in a user interface. If it's
Hmm,
more than 2 clicks away, it's not good. So direct interaction was pioneered with Next and the way that Next apps work. If you've ever seen the program Improv, which was from Lotus, um, it was a spreadsheet. Uh, that thing compared to VisiCalc and Excel of that
wow.
day was just head and shoulders above. It's like, oh, you want a group? Grab that column, drag it down to the left, group, done. you know, you want to resize the column? Click on the edge, pull it out, done. I mean, now it's obvious because it's what everything does, but not back then. Back then, it's like click on the column, go to the menu, select resize, type in the size you want, click OK. But he's
Wow.
like, why would you do all that? Click the thing. You want to move the column? Click the column name, move it to the next one, done. Right? It was all this direct manipulation. It should be obvious. You shouldn't have all these menus, ribbons, all that stuff. It's like, no, just direct manipulation. And if it gets beyond that, your app's too big.
Mm. Hmm.
Right? So anyway, that was the tirade. I mean, working with Steve was, I thought, great. He was great for the industry. And look at Apple now, right?
Right. Huge. And I wonder what Steve Jobs would have done with chat. GPT. I mean, like
I
you
don't
said, it's a
know. I
game.
mean, there's the plus sides and the downsides. I mean, if he didn't like something, it's not going to go well for that something. He killed off the Mac clone market, for example, for good or for bad, right?
Right.
Um, he created that app store and would not allow anything, any web apps or anything
Yeah.
like that, any things that compile at runtime, none of that sort of stuff. And they've had to relax some of that over time. So not everything he did was a golden egg.
Mm,
So Chappy GPT, who knows?
right.
He could just as easily ban it as do anything good with it.
Right. You never know. Now, Microsoft has invested into ChatGPT, I understand. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Early on, what it must have been about 4 years ago. I think we put in about $1 billion. Now there's talk of $10 billion investment and all that other sort of stuff. But we'll see. I mean, clearly it's the future for somebody. So
Absolutely. I've been using it, just typing in random questions every now and then. And I, even before we talked, William, I said, how do you develop a larger audience for your podcast? I
mhm,
just kind of, and it comes up with very, sensible, it takes a long time. Here are some things you could try. It's
yeah,
going to be really something. It's going to just change search engines, that's for sure, right? It's going
yeah,
to it is a game changer. I wonder. I'm anxious to see what happens there. Now, you also you've taken, I believe, more than one trip to Africa, which has really changed
yeah,
your perspective.
yeah, yeah. I went to when was it? 2017, 2018, Nigeria and Kenya, on the behest of one of our Nigerian engineers. Just said, you got to come to Africa. We want to set up offices here. We don't have any engineering offices. We had sales office, but we didn't do any engineering. So they wrote me in because I was, the kind of guy that gets stuff done. So they wrote me in. We went to the two countries in one trip in 1 week. We saw both countries, talked to a lot of local talent, saw a lot of local businesses, talked to customers, all sorts of stuff. And we ended the trip just saying, all right, we're just going to do this. We're going to have engineering here. So I went back and I actually hired the first engineer in Kenya, sorry, just to kind of get the ball rolling, to show my peers that it could be done. Here's what you should pay. Here's the talent that's available. Here's what we have to do to get them to the level we need them to, blah, blah, blah. So we ended up hiring about 16 people between what I was doing, Microsoft Research, and Office. We all kind of went together. And then now we're up to, I think there's about 650, but that information is a year old. So it's probably bigger than that now. And my idea there was, just like we went into India about 25 years ago and started this steady train of talent. It's like, well, how are you going to really tip the scales on this whole black engineers in tech thing? You got to do what we did in India. You got to go invest, and you just got to keep the train running. Now, the key thing is to not brain drain out too soon. So
Mm,
we went in with a strategy to say, no, you're going to hire in place. You're not going to brain train. You're not just going to show up with a bus and take everybody away. That's silly. You destroy the local economy by doing that. So let's go and invest, which we have. I don't work there anymore. But Microsoft has done that and it's continuing to grow. And I'm willing to bet that when it reaches a steady state of about 2,000 engineers that are in Africa, you'll be able to send 200 a year elsewhere, right? Now we're all remote working and stuff like that these days, so maybe they won't go anywhere. Um, but you have the capacity of 200 new engineers off continent every year, and that's because we invested then, right? It's like that's how you change the game, right? You don't go in and say, "Give me a grant so I can throw money at Africa." It's like, no, let's go hire engineers in Africa, right? Why are we ignoring 1.2 billion people on a continent that size? That's ridiculous. Let's go get us some engineers. So there we go. That was my trip to Africa.
I remember I thought you said at one point in your first ten years at Microsoft, you had only met one other, Black person?
Yeah, I mean, one other person that I actually worked with. I mean, I met a few blacks, and there's plenty of blacks at Microsoft. Mostly at that time, 24 years ago, sales marketing is where you'd find them most,
I see.
right? So in the halls of software development where I was, easily never saw any other black person in a meeting,
Wow.
right? I remember one black guy who was a tester who was peripherally in the org, the larger org of a couple hundred people that I was in. I didn't have regular meetings with him, but I knew who he was. And other than that, yeah, I was never in any meetings that had any other black people in it, let alone women. I mean, the women were there because they were in test and they were PMs. But uh, very few women software developers, and definitely no black software developers. Again, they existed in the company, but they were probably over there, and I wasn't over there. So in my world, nobody, and that's quite an interesting perspective, right?
Yeah, you mentioned PMs, project managers, for
Yeah.
anybody who's listening. Yeah, and I heard you say that some they came up with a bunch of female engineers came up with the menstruation app, and how men would have never thought of that, and
Uh,
now it's just become part of the iPhone. It's just part of
yeah.
the apps that's in there. So again, things that can lend. What should companies, specifically tech companies, do to become more, DEI compliant, and search for great talent that's minorities and women?
That's a hard one, but I've said this before. It's like, well, uh, if it's not part of your company mission to expand your total addressable market, you're not going to get anywhere, right? It never works to just kind of go out into the world and say, we need more diverse talent, because you won't believe it, right? There's no reason for it, there's no business objective related to it. And if someone's not getting paid for it, then it's not going to work, right? So you have to make
Hmm.
the true objective is like what we did in Africa. I kind of pointed at my execs and I said, look, we have a mission statement here that says we're going to empower every person on the planet to achieve more. We can't do that if we ignore 1.2 billion people of the planet, Africa, right? So therefore, it's a business objective to go and gain that perspective. Therefore, we need a bunch of engineers in Africa, right? So any business, I think, has to convince itself that they want to expand their market. If they just want to get the checkbox items, it's like, oh, we're now diverse. It's like, you're just going to fail. You might hire a bunch of people because you'll have a direct initiatives like, go hire 10 black people, but you won't retain them because they'll get in. The first year will be some sort of a honeymoon period. And then they'll pretty soon go, wait a minute, how come there's not 10 more?
Hmm.
And why did you hire me? And why did you give me a shit job that you don't even care about?
Right.
And where can I even get my hair done? See you later. You know, it doesn't work. So you have to start with, we're trying to address this market. We want to increase the number of women we sell to. We better get some women up in here so we can get a female perspective, because white boys from MIT probably don't have a great female perspective. Smart as a
Peckros.
whip,
Yeah.
not female.
Right.
So now you have an objective. We want to sell hair products to women. Well, how come there's no women at the table? Okay, we have a business objective to get women at the table now because we're
Right.
trying to sell hair products to women, right? And this works for anything, right? No matter what the thing is. So it starts with a business objective, and then you have to codify that into your hiring mission and your culture change, because you can say, all right, yeah, we want to address women. So we're going to hire them all. Yes, but your culture is toxically male. So you need to change your culture too,
Right.
right? Now that doesn't mean everyone has to, run around getting in touch with the feminine side and all that. But be aware that all those women you want to hire do not want to enter your locker room,
Mm.
right? At least have a female bathroom. And if you're getting women between 20 and 50, you might want to have a lactation room, breastfeeding room or something. You might want to have childcare in your benefits,
Right.
because men typically don't care. Women definitely care.
Right.
So you have to think the whole thing through and say, I have a business objective. Um, I'm going to make sure my culture is aligned with that business objective so that when I do get the people in, I show them that I care that they're here. I have some empathy for them, and then you've got to promote and all the other stuff that you're going to do with the males, right? And not just say you got in here, but it's going to be a long time before you get promoted.
Mm.
It's like, well, why would they stay with you then? Right? So I think you had to do all that. And then there becomes the mechanics of actually like how do you run a program to actually attract people and get them in and mentor them and all the rest. But that's the tail end of it. And that's where people typically start. They start with the program, but they don't do all the other work, and the program fails, and they go, see, they're just not out there.
Mm.
It's like, no, they're out there. You just, aren't attractive to them.
Yeah, you got to mean it. You got to mean it, William. I know the
You gotta mean it.
NFL's having this. Yeah, NFL needs to hire more, and these companies need to do more. And yeah, everything you pointed out there, just you can't just check a box. You really got to mean it. On the
Yeah.
podcast, we talk about discipline a lot. I always bring it up. I lost a lot of weight. When I was starting my company, my software development network support company back in the '90s, and next thing you know, I was, 340 pounds. I was eating pizza.
Ooh,
I was drinking
ooh,
soda. Yeah,
ooh.
those late night developing. It's
Yeah.
all pizza and soda. It's not healthy. And next thing my doctor says to me, if
You're
you
gonna
don't,
die.
you're pre-diabetic, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. That was the big thing. And by the way, she just graduated last May from Cal State, right? In your back.
Congratulations. Yay,
Yes.
you made it.
Yeah. So people ask me how did I lose 130 pounds? Like there's some
Discipline.
magic bullet, right? And it's just discipline and focus. I had
Yeah.
this moment. I turned around. How does discipline play a role in your life, William?
Um, there's intentional practices and there's routine and so what do? My alarm goes off at 4 a.m.
Wow.
Um, uh, I brush my teeth. you Maybe I put on some clothes, and I come down and I usually sit at my computer, uh, doing whatever I need to do early. And then 6:30 or 6:20 right now, I'm Muslim. I do namaz, morning prayer.
Hmm.
So that's guaranteed. And then right after that, I go and jump on the Peloton bicycle. So I get my usually 30 minutes to an hour, depending on schedule. So I do some exercise. So then by 7:30, 8 o'clock, I woke up. I started my day in tech. I did my spiritual thing. I did my exercise thing. Now I'm ready to start my day. So I start my discipline is basically just having a schedule, and this is really hard when you're like working at home, and now I don't have a boss. It's like
Right.
more important than ever that I have a routine. I have young children, so I pick them up from school at 3:35. So I have to get out the door by 3:15. You know, Dinners at this time. Their two extra classes are at this time. So it has to be routine, right? And I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder or run a marathon or anything like that, but hit the treadmill, the Peloton, take a walk, whatever, 30 minutes a day. If you can do that, that's something, right? Better than just sitting because we have sedentary work, right? All I do
Right.
is move my fingers all day long. Um, So with sedentary work, especially, you need to have get up. And my watch goes off every so many hours and says it's time to stand up,
Mm.
and I do. It's time to drink water, and I do. So stuff like that.
It's fascinating you kind of, equivocate, a synonym for discipline to you is schedule and routine.
Hmm.
That's wonderful. And was it the same thing when you were at Microsoft? Was the same thing as a youth, learning coding?
When I was a youth, I used to youth. So this is like high school, so ninth grade onward. I used to get up at 6 a.m. and I'd go wake my brother up and we'd go run. We were runners.
Wow.
So we'd get up every morning before school and we'd put in our 5 miles, or whatever it was. Uh, and then you go off and do your school day and then you practice after school. And I had a schedule, and we'd usually have things like, oh, we're in sports. Well, your practice is on these days, your games are on these days. So there's some structure, right?
Mm.
So I'd say, yeah, my life has probably always had some form of structure to it. Um, just because early on it was probably so my mom could keep us out of trouble.
Right.
It's like we grew up in areas where uh, gang violence and drugs and that sort of stuff, not heavy duty, but you could easily go that route if you weren't
Mm.
careful. So keep the kids busy, right? And I've maintained certain kinds of things, like at least waking up at 6. It's very rare that I'll sleep into like 8. If I do, it's like I feel tired.
Wow.
So early morning is important because it's like you have to intentionally start your day,
Mm.
right? Um, so yeah, I think discipline and some sort of schedule is useful. Um, yeah.
Very interesting. William A. Adams, what motivates you?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's just a sense of empathy is what motivates me, right?
Mm.
Because otherwise, why do anything? Why help anyone? I don't have to. I could just go sit on the beach with my tech gains and just relax, chill, until I die. But how boring is that, right? So it just comes down to, for me, it's like, well, why are you even alive, right? What's your purpose? What's your point? And you go through phases. When you're younger, you're chasing the golden ring, and you're up through midlife, you're building your wealth and securing your family's future and all that sort of stuff. And then in this phase of life, 50ish onward, you're more into the contemplative mentoring Yoda phase, where it's like, all right, um, I'm here to help other people. That's what I choose to make my life about, right? It's just a choice. Anyone else, I don't say everyone has to do that. Everyone else might look at me and say, "What an idiot! Why don't you just go windsurfing?" What are you helping people for? Just enjoy yourself. It's like, yeah, I can rest when I'm in the grave. So there's
Mm.
plenty of time for that. Eternity is a long time. So while you're on this planet, you might as well find something that's useful to the other people that are on the planet. And I have kids, so I want to leave something for them. I want to
Mm.
help their world be better. And I can do that by sharing the stuff that I'm sharing, right?
You bring up empathy a lot, excuse me, in
Oh,
some of
it's
your
important.
other conversations. Yeah. Yeah. And how do you measure success?
For myself,
Yeah.
um, well, there's practical numerical terms like, okay, I've helped 10 new companies become millionaires in the next 5 years. But more practically for myself is that I'm actually trying. I'm putting in the effort. I'm doing my best. I'm engaged. I'm not just sitting idly by, spending out of my retirement, right? So success to me is that I wake up every morning, I have a mission, I have clarity, and I'm pursuing it, right? That's the success. If I go through and there's down times, you go through a stretch, it's like, oh, I got sick, so I couldn't work for a month, or whatever. That's gonna happen. But if you have an intention, you have a goal, and you're pursuing it, that's success to me, right?
Mm.
Because you don't control how great it's going to be. That's in God's hands. But you can control whether you're going to engage in it or not. And if you don't engage, or you're not clear, or you don't have a mission at all, then it's like, wow. For me, I'm not successful if I don't have those things, right?
Very well put, William. It was such a great pleasure talking with you. I was so excited I get to geek out with somebody. It's very rare that we get to talk about, BASIC and C and the Commodore and the Atari. You're very inspiring. How can we get in touch with you? Anyone who's listening?
William-a-adams.com. It's got all my stuff, including all my
Yeah.
socials, as they say. Go to my website. We're doing all sorts of things, doing some videos. We just dropped a video on there, I think.
I saw it. It's
Um,
great.
oh, great. So the
On the
video's up
beach.
there.
Yeah.
Some podcasts, some papers, some code. This year will be full of code. So that'll be fun. So yeah, go to the website, check out what I'm doing, subscribe to my newsletter, and you'll get a monthly update of what's going on.
Also, I have we'll put in the show notes your GitHub. And
Oh,
tell
yeah?
us about the event. The event is spelled EV3NT.
Yeah, yeah. What is that? So the event is a thing we do, or trying to do, every once in a while, where we go into a community and essentially hack a community and teach a community how to achieve something on their own, so that they can get an equity share of whatever they produce. I'll give you a practical example. The one that we want to do this year, and we'll see if we're successful, is in the Caribbean, U.S. Virgin Islands. They have waste management challenges, and the event is a combination of, let's bring in experts from different places, different disciplines that you wouldn't normally have access to.
Hmm.
So if you can imagine TED Talks, which I'm sure you've watched, and there's some expert, who's come from somewhere, and they give a talk, and then that's it, and we all go off. It's like, ideas worth sharing. So the event is ideas worth implementing. So you would have that expert come, the expert on waste management, the expert on chemistry, the expert on welding, who might be local. And we're going to try an experiment of taking all the plastic of your waste management, running it through this process called pyrolysis, and turning it into diesel fuel that you can then use in your power plant, right? They can't do that on their own because they don't have the local expertise. But if you can bring people from other places to share a little bit of lecture, but more about hack, right? Hey, expert, don't just talk, sit down and do it with us, right? And then the community is going through this process, and they come up with something. It's like, oh, this works for us. And we have something that we can now sell to other communities like us, right? So the event is that. It's just doing these wild and crazy things in certain communities where you're tackling a really hard problem and leaving behind the tools such that that community can create their next thing on their own, right? But they're now tapped into a network of people who are like, hey, we need a physicist. It's like, oh, I know physicists. I'm part of the National Society of Black Physicists. What do you need?
Wow.
So that's what the event is. It's just saying, let's do this hack thing, but do it at a community scale, right?
That's wonderful. How long have you been doing that?
Oh, last year was the start. So
I see.
this is the second year.
That is absolutely wonderful. William, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. If I'm in the Redmond, Seattle area, I'll sure look you up. Maybe we have a cup of coffee, but good luck to you in the future. And I hope eventually to meet you, and anything I could do to help you, let me know. And Tequity and equality, we need to do our best to make sure it happens.
Yeah. All we have to do is do it. Right?
It's that
Just do
simple.
it.
Thank you so much. You be well.
All right. Thank you.
Bye now. Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinn's Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinn's Discipline Conversations.